The title of this video is actually a little strange to make sense out of. I'm calling it Nachman of Breslav and Children Who Hate. Now what does Nachman of Breslav have to do with children who hate? Because usually we think of Nachman of Breslav as some very holy rabbi dealing with very holy people. But of course any rabbi deals also with people that are not so holy. Now Children Who Hate is the name of a book that I read in 1970 or so, a long time ago, by Redl and Wyman, a very important book. I learned a lot from it. Children Who Hate, they're talking about children old enough to be troublemakers and not old enough to be adult criminals, in the middle there. I happen to know some of these kids. And so what I want to do today is to tell you my story about how I know these kids and tell you what that has to do with Nachman of Breslav. For me, it's amazing the connections that I find between Nachman of Breslav and Children Who Hate. So little by little I'll get to that idea. There's so much here, there's so much to talk about. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. It might be 1 hour, it might be 3 hours, I don't know, as long as it takes to say what I want to say. I think the best way to start out is, well, maybe one little quote from Nachman of Bresav would be nice. In one of his books, one of his essays, he says, "Were they to hear just one of my lessons, together with its proper melody and dance, they would reach a state of total transcendence. I mean, the whole world, even the animals and plants, everything that exists would be nullified. Their very souls would depart from the overwhelming delight they would experience." Okay, I think that that quote fits in with what I want to say here, but certainly it's not obvious at the beginning. I think the easiest way to start off is to start off with a brief description of how I know about Children Who Hate, a workshop that I ran back in 1972 or 3. And the reason is that, well, to make a long story short, what I saw back in those days, before I learned anything about Kabbalah, before I knew even about what is gestalt therapy, I had just spent many years studying science and music and a little bit of theater, and I found out about theater improvisation exercises. And so I had the bright idea one day of walking in to a school for kids like this in New York City somewhere, and volunteering, and the principal agreed and the guidance counselor agreed. So I ran a workshop for 5 weeks with kids, 2 groups of 10-year-olds, one group of, these are all boys, all black kids. These are all kids that were thrown out of public schools for being too disruptive, violent. So I had 2 groups of 10-year-olds, one group of 12-year-olds, and one group of 14, 15-year-olds. And we met twice a week for 5 weeks, total of maybe 10 sessions times 2 hours, about 20 hours of work. And what was amazing to me when we did the process, it was the way that the topics that they worked on, one after the other, were very consistent in the 4 different groups. And they followed a very clear pattern that was so obvious and so beautiful to see. And then I more or less put that stuff aside for 40 years, 1972 to 2012, that's 40 years went by just about. And I didn't spend much time thinking about that stuff. And then when I got into this, more and more as I get into Nachman of Breslav, especially this section 64, which I want to deal with today, I see, lo and behold, the same results that I found before I studied any Kabbalah, before I ever heard of Nachman of Breslav, maybe, I don't know, maybe I heard of him. But here I see the same thing happening, but I see it in his terminology, Nachman of Breslav's, how he describes the process. Of course, he's using Kabbalistic mumbo-jumbo, And so part of what I need to do today, in fact most of what I need today, is to translate his Kabbalistic mumbo jumbo into something simple that we could talk about quickly in a video. And that's why I want to start with the workshop, because there we see, lo and behold, almost magical how something so obvious and simple and human happens without any of the technical jargon, without any, in fact, without even any talking. In that workshop, there was very little talking. Kids basically came in there. I gave them warm-ups, stretch exercises, relaxing exercises, trust exercises. The whole thing took 5-10 minutes. But most of the time they spent doing improvs, and I set it up so it would be as basically as chaotic as possible. In other words, I brought in all kinds of masks and pieces of rags, costumes, and objects like, for example, a chain, and I was happy to find there was a nice big ladder in the room. All kinds of stuff that was not breakable. I brought in some rhythm instruments to pound on, things like a tambourine, and cowbell or whatever. I don't know what else I brought in there in those days. And it was basically like play therapy for teenagers. And these kids walked in there. They never saw me before. They had no idea what I wanted to do. They just volunteered to do some kind of play acting class or something. And there it was, a whole new situation for them. And so in a sense it was like the void, a new situation. And we see how kids like this, who are not simple ordinary kids, these kids have been through, I guess you would call it hell from a psychological and sociological point of view. They're all kids that were thrown out of public schools and are here because that's like the last stop before who knows what else they go into. So, all right, that's the background. And here's what happened. The series of themes is rather amazing to see. The first session, just about every group, they were dealing with drugs. Probably because I asked one kid, he said, how old is the oldest junkie you know? 13. And these kids were right in the middle of that, right around that age. So these kids were dealing with the street, being tempted to do drugs and making that decision. So apparently that was top shelf on their minds. That's what they wanted to deal with. So we had all kinds of stories about junkies and getting caught, and the scenes of taking dope, and shooting in your arm, or all kinds of stuff. Then after that, the next topic of the week was violence. The next week, or maybe I don't know exactly how many weeks it took, but 10 sessions. Second topic was violence. All kinds of stuff being killed, killing. In those days it was 72, they were still thinking World War II, so they were out to kill the Japs and things like that. And getting killed. Next came sex, all kinds of sex stories. And along with that, acting out being female, they would pick up a mask, a female mask, or put on a female hat and start doing a bump and grind. Now, by the way, I had all kinds of music going on here, all kinds of, to get them excited to do things. There was like rock music and far out contemporary music and all kinds of ethnic music, anything to get them going. So in this sense, it was the opposite of a usual class situation. Usually you want kids to sit down and shut up and listen. In this case, the opposite. I wanted them to get up on their feet and start doing things, and didn't care what. The rules are very simple. You can't hurt anybody, you can't get hurt, and you got to keep your clothes on. Not supposed to steal, but if they did steal something, I didn't make a big deal out of it. First of all, I didn't bring anything, expensive, and I didn't want them, to feel guilty or anything. In fact, I even did the cleanup myself at the end of the session. I would spend a lot of time cleaning up all the mess, so that it would be basically totally free, safe environment. Okay, so the first topic was drugs, then came violence, then came sex, then came, after those three, finally we get to some normal stuff, sports, having a good time, things that normal kids would start off a class like this with. And then the last couple of weeks we get to personal problems. You know, talk a little bit, talking about their life and looking back, all the trouble they got into and things like that. So that's what happened. And there was no psychology going on here, no verbal discussion of what your problems are. I didn't ask what their problems were. I just said, let's have some fun. Here are the toys. Let's just have some fun. And they trusted enough in the situation that they were willing to go with the flow. And lo and behold, they got results. And when I got through, I printed all the stuff up. I made notes. I printed up my notes. By the way, I kept a careful record of what every kid did, so I can later on write about it. And I made up my own theory. And in those days, I was mostly into anthropology. I had spent many years studying science and theater and music and theater, but I hadn't got to any kind of in-depth thing with religion. I was mostly at the time into anthropology. Things like Victor Turner especially influenced me. The Ritual Process, very important book. Looking at this stuff from the point of view of, you know, well, if it's an African tribe, how do you make sense of what these guys are doing here? Some kind of primitive rituals. I remember I read some anthropologist named Malinowski talking about anxiety, transferring anxiety into performance events. And who else? Active Society by somebody named Etzioni. A little bit of dialectical thinking, but I really hadn't studied much dialectical philosophy either at that time. So I basically made up my own little, I took from these sources and put it together and came up with a basically very simple idea of a theory. The idea is simply to take a ladder, for example. There's a ladder in a class. So a kid sees a ladder, he has an idea, oh, I think I'd like to be on a ladder. So climbs up on the ladder, looks down at everybody, oh, I think I'd like to jump off the ladder. So he jumps off the ladder. Take this typical situation like that. Couldn't be simpler. So I gave it some complicated scientific name, anthropological name. I said, kid at the beginning here is orientation number 1. Orientation, he has an idea, I want to be up there on a ladder. So he climbs up here on a ladder, and now he's actualized, he's made an event out of that idea. He made a pattern out of it, a pattern of behavior. So I wanted a word to describe that. I guess must have got it from some source, I don't remember where. But I put together the word symbolization. He symbolized. Why symbolization? Sim means together in Latin. Bolein means, maybe it's Greek, I don't know. To throw. So you throw together parts of my experience and make a little ritual out of that. So he made up the ritual of climbing the ladder. And so I went from orientation number 1, I want to be up there. Symbolization number 1, I climb on a ladder. Orientation number 2, once I'm up here, hey, I think I want to jump down. So it's a new orientation, but he wouldn't have got to that if he didn't do the first symbolization. So let me say, orientation number 2, jumps down, that's symbolization 2. Symbolization number 2, dropping down. And then we go on, and let's say next thing was orientation 3 might be, okay, I think I want to put on that hat. So he puts on the hat, that's symbolization number 3. Etc., etc. Infinite. That was my theory, and that was my practice in those days. Okay, so that's the basic idea to start off with. And now, I want to relate that to Nachman of Bresav a little bit. A lot. Not a little bit, a lot. And I want to show you basically that it's very similar. Question is how to do it. There's so many ways to begin here, it's endless. Who comes to mind? How about the idea of faith? Nachman of Bresav is his main thing is faith, practically. He's in what we call the pietist tradition rather than the papist tradition. His is religion of the heart, focuses on faith. So you might say in this workshop, these kids had a certain amount of faith. they walked into a new situation with a stranger. They see a bunch of tempting objects and they hear a lot of tempting music, and they're told they can do what they want as long as they don't kill each other. And so little by little, they trusted more and more, and they got results. I would say there was some kind of a growth process going on there. And a lot of it had to do with having faith that somehow or other, something's going to happen here, something that might be useful to me, or it's at least going to be fun anyway. And one of the main points in essay number 64 here again, Nachman of Bresav, one of his main conclusions is, at the end of days, the Messiah, in this case he's talking about Moses as some kind of a Messiah figure here, will come back and everyone will sing together. Especially Moses will be like the song leader. From the Bible, you know, they say Moses supposedly sang when he got the Torah, and then when the Messiah comes, Moses will be there again, and everybody will sing again. So in Hebrew they say V'yashir Moshe, and Moses will sing. So the idea of the moment when the Messiah comes and total faith is all the faith that people had for all these thousands of years is finally justified, and everything is all the bad things are caught up in the flow of good things, and the whole river flows up to that point, and everybody is singing along with Moshe. So here we have the idea of music, which is very important in Nachman of Bresav also. So we need to deal with music here. And there are three major essays that I so far have worked on where he deals with music. 64 is probably the most important one, but also another very important is 282, Azamara, I Will Sing, it's called. Maybe we'll start with that. That's the simplest one to talk about music. And then number 22 also has a lot about music. So there are three sections there. Now, no way I'm going to cover all that stuff in one video, or even two videos, or three videos. But a little bit just to... So we started off with the idea of faith as a common element. Now, so what are my ingredients here? My work here, these are my notes from the workshop. This is the essay that I published. Drama review, by the way, November 73, if you want to check out the original. It's called The Theory and Practice of Orientation Therapy. So it's a kind of drama therapy. And when we talk in terms of music terms, like Nachman he doesn't talk about drama therapy, he talks about music. And very consistently, he always talks about it the same way. It's one of the main building blocks of his system. So then we can talk about music therapy, because ultimately the big musical event in the end of days when Moses is leading everybody in a song session, that's music therapy. Somehow music has something to do with healing everybody and bringing the redemption. So that's another thing we need to understand. So we're doing drama therapy, we're doing music therapy, and somehow we're educating kids, all these things together. And what's next? Maybe I should say something about music. Let's pick up that thread, go into that a little bit. What does it have to do with it? Now, excuse me. This here is springtime in Israel. And I live in one of those settlements which is surrounded by all kinds of stuff growing, and this is the season, everything is... So I got lots of pollen in the air, so I'm sniveling. Anyway, so music. Probably the most simple, basic idea of how Nachman uses the term music is you find in essay number 282, called I Will Sing, Azamara. And there he says, we need to find the good points and judge everything in the scale of zechut, value. In other words, not to judge, not to be critical, but rather to really What does he mean by find the good points? Well, it turns out what he means is awareness. Awareness. When I see something, for example, I look out there and I see a clock with a red frame. I see redness. Now, if I see redness, that's awareness. If I judge the clock, oh God, it's an old clock, I need to replace it. Right away, I didn't see the clock anymore. I saw my idea and my judgment. This is a very basic idea in dialectical philosophy, Judaism. They say God created the world first with judgments, and so it didn't work, so he had to add the other side, the love. Contacting objects rather than judging them. So that's what Nachman means by music. Every moment of awareness is a note. We string the moments together, we make a melody. So I see the redness of the clock. I see the brownness of the chair that the clock is on. I see red and brown. And I see, on top of that, I see a red light that's flashing. So I see red, brown, red, flashing brown. The rhythm of the light is boom, 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 boom. Now if I imagine, for example, the rhythm of the clock is boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, chicka. And the rhythm of the brown chair is boom, chicka, wonk, boom, chicka, wonk. I made a whole melody. Of course, that was just a game. But he's very serious about it. And in a very philosophical, profound way. So we're going deeper and deeper now, just with the idea of music. There are two major kinds of thinking in dialectical thinking, which of course underlies the whole Kabbalah, Jewish Kabbalah. Kabbalah is dialectical thinking with Jewish labels. And about 20 different essays of mine and 10 different videos, I've talked about the same thing, so I'll repeat it here again. The idea that there are two kinds of logic, inductive logic and deductive logic. Very important to have that framework here. And what Nachman is saying basically is that music is inductive logic, awareness. And the opposite of that is deductive logic, absence of awareness. In essay number 22, he talks about boldness as music. The opposite of that is brazenness. That's I don't want to get into that right now, but there it is again, the same distinction. And here it is in music here. So going on with music here, in the melody, so when Moses is singing, he's singing at the end of days, he's bringing all the gazillion different moments of awareness, of enlightenment come together. Because remember that these awareness moments are like all the gestalts, they all come together in higher level gestalts, more and more encompassing, more and more compensating, more integration of experience, working towards the oneness, returning to God, the oneness, bringing all the manyness back to God and oneness. So that process is inductive logic, where all the separateness gets sucked up into the river flowing towards the oneness. So that's inductive logic. Again, Latin root is in, going in. Ducer, to lead. It leads in towards God. And the opposite, deductive logic, leads away. Ducer, lead. Depart from, like depart, go away. So one leads towards the oneness integration, and deductive logic leads away from oneness. The idea that God creates the world, well, he starts off with one idea, and he breaks everything down into a gazillion different creatures, and that's deductive thinking. But then he wants to bring everything back to him, so he does inductive thinking, and the whole cycle there. The deductive side is water. This is alchemy. In alchemy, this idea of going from water to earth. Everything is stuck too much, separated, too much deduction. And then it creates, everything is all locked, frozen. And then into that comes little spaces from the air, alchemical air, and into the spaces come fire. And the fire burns up the earth and brings everything back to the oneness. And so you have water, earth, air, fire. The four elements of alchemical thinking right there. So induction is music, is going back towards God. All right. So when Moses sings, that's the idea that all the moments of awareness come together, and that's exactly what happened in the workshop. Going back to the workshops, it's simple to see. Kids walk in, they see objects. It's not like they're seeing, this is a ruler, you're supposed to measure with it, and this is a science class, and if you don't get it right, you're going to flunk, and then you'll get kicked out of school, and your mother's going to beat you, and your father's going to leave the home, and all this stuff. No guilt trip, just here's the piece of wood, here's a broomstick. What do you want to do with it? Oh, it's a penis. Okay, so it becomes a penis. Oh no, it's a machine gun. I'll kill the Japs. Okay, I'll kill the Japs. The object is neutral. It's in the theory I quoted then from some psychiatrist. What was his name? I forgot. But he calls it intermediary objects. In a situation like this, in a ritual space like this, the intermediary object is something that you project an idea onto it. You use it as a projection screen. So these objects in my drama therapy class were all projection screens, and they made them whatever they wanted to make it out of them. And again, as long as nobody gets hurt, it's fine. The fact that there was music playing most of the time, that's not the issue. The music that was playing in the workshop was not the music we're talking about here. We're talking about the moments of awareness when the kid could just look at a stick and see it as a stick without having to get involved in a guilt trip about it, or fit it into his framework where if I see a stick I got to hit somebody in the head with it because otherwise the kids will think I'm a sissy. He's leaving that behind and he's just looking at it and seeing it as a stick, a piece of something to put in my hand and to do something with, and trust that what I do with it will somehow be helpful, or at least fun. So that's the sense of music, that kind of music. And let's see. While I'm at it, let's just see if I covered some of the major ideas here about music. All right. So now, I think now we need to, you might say that was introduction. Let's see, that took us about half an hour. And now we're going to, I think that we have to get to the main course on the menu here, which is essay number 64, really tackling it. Up to now we wanted to show how the workshop illustrates based some certain ideas from Nachman of Bresav. For example, the idea of music and the idea of faith. But now we want to start from essay number 64 itself and go a lot deeper. And every once in a while we'll come back to the workshop to help clarify things. But I do want to I'm taking upon myself the responsibility, the risk. It's heavy stuff, believe me, of dealing with this. All right. So let's see here. All right, let's see. These are my notes from 64. This is the text of 64 when I need it. This is the Breslav Research Institute version. I use their text as a basic reference point, but then I make very different. So a lot of times they translate the words differently and do something. My comments are a lot of times very different than theirs. So you can decide for yourself which is more interesting to you. Okay, so this is my outline here. He starts off 64. He says, well, let's read it. God created the world as a consequence of his compassion, for he wanted to reveal his compassion. And if creation had not taken place, to whom would he have shown his compassion? See, they translated it as to whom. Al mi haya mareh rachmanuto. Again, Later on in the essay, he uses the same idea, to whom, but he makes it clear that what he's talking about there is with whom, because the word al could be also mean together with or near to. So that becomes a difficult point. So again, now what does compassion mean? In the Kabbalah, compassion, or is another way, usually a metaphor for mercy, is usually alludes to the one of the Sefirot, one of the main ideas of the Kabbalah, points of view, and that's the point of view of what they call chesed, or grace, and it's usually an opposition between chesed on the right side. Let's see, this will be your right side is over here, my right side is over here. And din, or gevura, or judgment. So we have grace, or mercy on one side, and judgment on the other side. That major opposition here, two ways of thinking. You can think of them as opposites, but in the Kabbalah a lot of times they think of them as complements. You need one to complete the other. Too much freedom, then you got to have something to restrain it. Too much restraint, then you got to have something to release. Too much restraint, you got to then release yourself from bondage, or find some way to get released from bondage. Now let's go back to the kids for a moment. These are kids that arrived at this workshop, in a sense, in a frozen box of habits. They know exactly what they're supposed to think. They're supposed to think what the other kids on the block think and what the gang think. So you can look at it in terms of developmentalists as saying that, well, once upon a time they had some healthy habits, just like every kid. And then things happened, various traumas happened, various forces happened at home, at school. And little by little, they got to doing too much of certain things and not enough of other things. All right? So it's a state of excess and a state of deprivation on the one, back and forth, or two together. And the workshop, somehow or other, gave them a chance to experiment with writing the balance. The faith, you might say, was a kind of a solvent which dissolved some of this crud here. These habits loosened them up and allowed them to flow more, to get the balance between the left and the right, to get to the middle way. The middle way, by the way, is the central idea of this whole well, probably most of Nachman of Breslav, but in particular, you find it here. In this essay, it's very central, the whole middle way. A lot of times Nachman talks about Yaakov as the synthesis between Abraham and Isaac. Abraham is the side of awareness. Isaac is the side of deduction. So you have induction, deduction, and the balance. Jacob, the middle pillar, combines the two. Proper balance is the complete dialectical system, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Right, that's a whole long story. I'm not going to explain the whole dialectical philosophy again. I've done it about 20 times on 20 different essays and videos. So I have to assume something here. I can't just go back to the beginning every time. I assume you know what when I say thesis, antithesis, synthesis, you know what I have some idea what I'm talking about anyway. Okay, so going to this, again, back to essay 64, and the idea of excess and lack here, two extremes. Look what he says. So first of all, God creates the world by compassion. In other words, by having a proper balance. But the trouble is, there are two kinds of evil that come from basically excess. He calls them two kinds of epikorsot. Epikors, it's ironical, he uses the Greek, you know, the Jews are always, the rabbis are always saying, don't come near the Greeks, it's evil stuff. You look in the Jewish dictionaries, you find epikorsot, epikorsi, they use the word epikuros as to symbolize a lack of faith, what they call skepticism, and also licentiousness, excess, too much. But ironically, they never read Epicurus, since his philosophy was the middle way, just like Nachman's is, except instead of getting to a faith, the idea is you get to it through seeking pleasure. And yet, but if you think of really what gives a person pleasure in his life in the long term, it's balancing the sides of his personality and dealing with the situations in a way of moderation and simplicity and all of that stuff, humility. So it's the jargon that screws us up, and the Jews are not doing justice to Epicurus by calling excess licentiousness and lack of faith. Well, okay, lack of faith, but certainly Epicurus is not preaching licentiousness the way the Jews usually say he's preaching that. So there are two kinds of heresy, two kinds of Epicurusite, according to Nachman of Bresav. There's one kind that it's possible to correct it, and the other kind, you can't correct it, but the only way to get out of it is with faith. Now here, let's go back to that view. The kids growing up, they do things to adjust the situations, and just like everybody else, when you find that a particular technique works, like maybe crying gets mama to give me what I want, so they might decide, okay, I'm going to be a crybaby without being aware of it. They get into that crybaby shtick, and later on, lo and behold, when they try it in school, it doesn't work so well, and they try it with their wife, works even less well. But the thing is, they're stuck with that habit, that game we call it, gestalt therapy. So then how do you get out of it? Well, you go pay a lot of money to a psychiatrist, I guess, if you want to do that, or get divorced from your wife, because she's sick and tired of listening to all the whining. So it can be very destructive of these excesses when they freeze into habits. And so the Nachman says that this sort of stuff can be when you meet somebody that gives you that kind of, or you become that way, and you freeze into this kind of evil, then there's a way out of it. He says, since these original problems started off being normal things, therefore, they're reversible. It's a basic idea. I just said it in simple words. Since it started off as a normal habit, and since it got to be excess, well, you just reverse the habit somehow, get out of the habit, and you go back to what was there originally. It's reversible. So the Kabbalists, they want to say this, they won't say it that simple way, God forbid. They have to find another way to say it. So what they say is that originally they were vessels, ways of behavior flows, structures, and because of excess, or you might say, originally God's light came down and into these various vessels, has created the world and created our habits. And these habits froze due to excess, too much light. So the crybaby habit got too much crybaby light and froze up. So how do you get out of it? Well, there is a way out of it. But since it came from something that's natural, there's a way out of it. I think the easiest way to get the point here is to relate to gestalt therapy. Gestalt therapy is another therapy, very similar, in some ways similar to what this drama therapy stuff here is, in the sense that you start off with people that are locked into habits, and you give them some kind of a universal solvent or something called awareness, and allows them gradually to loosen up their habits and to get to more of a state of integration through a process of a certain amount of faith in the process and sticking with it. It's very, very related. So how do you work on, if you have you meet a person that has a habit, for example, crybaby habit, so you tell the person, if I'm directing a person doing that, I say, okay, play the crybaby, and play your mother who's being sucked in by the crybaby. Do that a few times so you're very aware of what the habit you're stuck in. And now, let's talk about it. How do you feel? How do you see? How do you feel looking at yourself in that state of affairs? Guy might say, "Oh my God, I was a fool back in those days." Then you say, "Okay, so have a conversation with your 5-year-old self, crybaby, and talk to see what you decide to get." So you say to your 5-year-old self, "Hey, crybaby, you know, I'm kind of tired of listening to you whining all the time. Can't you be more creative?" And the crybaby says, "Yeah, but I gotta go and I want the world." And the adult looking at himself says, "Well, you're not gonna get what you want that way. You know, try this, try that, try that." Anyway, these all kinds of techniques to loosen up these frozen habits. Another way would be close your eyes, go inside, get an image, and a guy would see an image. "Oh, I see an image of a river." "Oh, okay, what does a river have to do with the crybaby?" "Oh, well, this crybaby, he doesn't flow at all. I like to flow in my life, you know. I like to be like the river, not like a crybaby stuck in a game." So that's another way to deal with all kinds of techniques, but they're all based on being in the here and now and trusting that something will come out of it. So they're all what we call meditative processes, aimed at the messianic now, being totally in the now. Okay, so this is an example of heresy number one, evil number one, and how to get out of it. In 64, message number 64. Now let's see if I just pin it down by saying it in his words. He says, no, there are two types of heresy. One is the heresy that stems from secular wisdom. In other words, too much deduction, too much separating things across into opposites. Of this it is said, and know what to answer the heretic, since this heresy has an answer. Now we just saw that there is a way to deal with this kind of heresy. In other words, go back, loosen up the habits in the here and now. This is because it stems from secular wisdom, which stems from extraneous elements. In other words, the idea of too much light, from the aspect of the shattering of the vessels. And overload of the light causes the vessels to break, and this brought into existence the forces of evil. Shattering of the vessels. Now remember, a behavior pattern, whatever we do in our life, is a relationship between me and a subject and an object. If I have a pattern with that chair over there, well, it's because I see the chair, so right away there's a subject here. Adam looks at the object, Eve, Chochmah looks at Bina, the two sides of the tree of life, and we establish a certain relationship. And that relationship usually consists of me sitting on the chair and not having the chair sit on me. That's a basic healthy relationship to a chair. But too much light, let's say I become psychotic and I start throwing chairs around and smashing them against the floor, like against the walls and against people. Every time I get upset about something, well, then here I am in a ward, and with Thorazine to calm me down, whatever they use these days. And so that was too much light in the vessel, the contact channel, you might say, that connects me and that chair. Too much, overdid it. You don't throw chairs around, at least at people anyway, unless you're in a play therapy class. So that's called the shattering of the vessels. The simple contactful relationship between me and that chair, which was like a river, became like two pieces of ice. It froze up and very separated. There's no logical, there's no flowing, contactful, living relationship between me and that chair. It becomes an object that I use for my needs violently rather than as part of a process of me and the chair dealing together in a way of creative adjustment, creative aggression, as they call it. So that vessel, the original relationship with me and that chair, has been shattered, and all the sparks all over the place. Every time I see a chair, I either want to smash it or imagine it smashing me. I project it all over the place. There's a chair spark over there, a chair spark over there, but it's all shattered There's no organism, no overall relationship tying everything together. Okay, so that's an example of healthy, see now, what in Nachman would call them essences, or tabniyot, patterns, or ideas. Normal ideas becoming what I guess Leibniz would call confused ideas. Okay, so but this kind of stuff is reversible, because since it's based on me knowing, once upon a time, knowing how to deal with a chair in a creative way, we can imagine that if I maybe did some gestalt therapy work talking to the chair, if I'm not beyond the point where I can't, if I'm still able to do gestalt therapy work, if I'm not too locked into my routines. So it's conceivable to reverse that and restore the original vessel through awareness. And so that's what's happening a lot of times in this workshop. Going back to the workshop, kid sees a stick, a broomstick, that usually used for him, since it's a shattered vessel, broomstick equals hit somebody in the head, or run away, they can hit me on the head, or smash a window, or break the broomstick, or some kind of violent act. But by playing with the broomstick in a free flow situation, you can restore a childhood, a simple, naive relationship to a piece of wood, and playing with it as a toy. So that puts him on, as they say in the theater world, performer on top of his material. He's now like God, riding on the Aravot, riding on top of the world. He knows it's his world, so he can control it. At the same time, he totally involved in the world, so he have a creative balance there. So this restores a creative balance in the relationship of the kid to the objects, such as a broomstick. Okay, so that's one kind of evil. The other kind of evil there's even more excess. Things get so shattered, so far apart, that there doesn't seem to be any way to get them back together again. The only way to get them back together again is faith. So you hear stories of people, maybe that it got into drugs or something, where it got to a point where they couldn't do exercises like this very well, or gestalt therapy techniques. They're really, and in a lot of ways, children that hate are not so amenable. Verbal therapy, in most cases, doesn't work very well with them. Also psychotics. I haven't done this process with autistic kids, but I imagine it would be important to try it out at least and see what happens there. So there we have a new label. Nachman talks about, he uses the metaphor in 64 here, of the world is created by speech. Speech. Speaking. And he likes to talk about the rabbis as being God's helpers to create the world. So the rabbis, when the rabbis have a discussion, of course everybody's supposed to listen, and especially when they have disputes, to listen to the disputes, as long as the disputes are not too much, not overdone. And that way the world is created. Why? Because every time there's a dispute, it's like the two sides pull to the side and allow an empty space. This idea of an empty space where the system of inductive logic, the framework, the matrix of our everyday thinking patterns is somehow or other it doesn't work anymore, and there's an empty space there because the sides are too far apart. That we call the empty space, Halal HaPanui, very key concept in the Kabbalah. So when that's too much, So in 64 he says, the rabbis create the world. That, I wanted to say, I referred to that before. He has a quote from the Bible, and then God is saying something about my people. And then Nachman says, don't read my people, read, instead of ami, read imi, which in Hebrew means with me. Instead of my people means with me. So God is saying to the Jews, okay, by having your disputes, your creative disputes, as long as you don't overdo it, that way you're creating the world, because every time there's a dispute, then in the space that's opened up there, new Torah ideas can be born, and people can find ways to deal with reality better through the Torah, through using the Torah, but all the time creating new points of view about the Torah, so that's creative use of the empty space. But of course, he says we shouldn't talk too much. If we talk too much, then again we get the shattering of the vessels. I'm looking, I see we have about 5 more minutes of this video, so I'm going to aim to just deal with this topic of speaking, and then probably I'll stop the video there and continue in the next video. The very important idea of speech. So speech is the way that it creates the world. As man is in contact, together with God, creates the world. The same thing happens to gestalt therapy. When I start describing my dream this, and then I start acting. I play the different roles, because gestalt therapy also is a monologue, one big talking thing. So I'm creating a world there. Every time I describe a new object in my dream and my therapy work, I'm creating another unit of reality there, and a little world there, by possible new center of consciousness, a new world. And they all come together at the end of the 3-hour Gestalt session. And the big idea, the message of the dream, you might say, the existential message. Same thing here. So people create the world that way, together with God. But if we overdo it, too much talk, then it doesn't work. We get the space is empty, too big. And then once we get to the empty space there, and this is where it ties in with the orientation therapy the kids are doing here. Let's assume these kids, a lot of them, for a lot of issues, are really too fractured, vessels too broken to be easily dealt with in verbal therapy or even in reasonable play therapy. They need something more thorough, you might say, or basic. So the same thing here. Nachman says, when you get to a place where there's too much empty space, because the sides are too far apart and there's no way to deal with the problem, to answer to the evil, to answer the heresy, there's no way to get back to God. So then you got to have somebody like Moshe, the perfect Messiah, who knows how to work has a special technology of the sacred, that he knows how to work with empty spaces like this. And his technology is, instead of words, his technology is silence. I think there's a philosopher named Wittgenstein who makes a big deal out of silence. Maybe it's related, I don't know, I haven't studied Wittgenstein. But anyway, this technique in the drama therapy session was silence. There was no talking practically about their problems, just giving them a chance to go with the flow. Orientation, symbolization. Orientation, symbolization. The pure dialectic. Chochmah, Bina. Adam, Eve. Back and forth, back and forth. On the highest level, because it's purely personal, the highest level is what they call Atzilut, the nearest level, Etzel, to be near God. So these guys were very close to what their idea of God might have been by allowing themselves this very free dialectical flow. Moses, the same thing. Symbolizes in the Kabbalah, especially for Nachman of Bresav, the idea of silence. Same thing. In gestalt therapy, when you have two sides that are very far apart, the director tells the client, close your eyes, go inside, contact your body. Allow yourself to forget about the conflict you just had and do a daydream. Out of the daydream comes a new idea. Let's say the idea would be, I see a bird. What does that have to do with you when you're fighting with your father? I don't know. So let's talk about the bird. What kind of bird is it? Oh, well, what if there was music with the bird? What kind of music would it be? Oh, it would be I hear Messiaen's word, tweet, 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 tweet. He has a thing about birds. Okay, that kind of music. How does it make you feel, that music? It makes me antsy like this. Oh, what does that have to do with your father? Oh, I remember my father makes me very nervous. I want to express my energy. Oh, so you see what happened is, going into the void gave you a new idea of bird, which was reinforced by the music. The music, again, remember, is an inductive process. The moments, and that gave you a way out of the impulse. Because what happened was that before you were stuck in the two sides, me and my father, no talking to each other, nothing, and all of a sudden, lots of energy. Yeah, I want to. So what do you want to do with the energy? I want to hit my father. Okay, hit your father. Okay. So expressing aggression towards your father becomes a way out of. Before you wouldn't talk to him, you wouldn't look at him. He wouldn't look at you. You wouldn't look at him. But just by doing it, okay, take a pillow, beat the pillow. Beat the pillow, you get to express the aggression, right away the relationship moves ahead, you're ready for the next cycle of dialectic. Same thing here, except we do it non-verbally. So, in a sense, the silence is the element that's needed to deal with these places where usual verbal techniques don't work, where the sides are too far apart, and it has to be faith. What is seeing the bird and pounding on the pillow after your father? No logical connection at all. But there's faith there that somehow, if I do it, it might help somehow. So the element of faith takes over when our rational mind gets overwhelmed. Okay, so there's a common element between the gestalt therapy and what Nachman of Bresav is saying, that Moses, as the Messiah, at the end of days, since his technique is silence, he has the power to bring all the opposites of the world, to elevate all the frozen oppositions, all the conflicts, and they all start flowing. The cycle from alchemical earth to water to earth to air to fire, that starts flowing freely, and that's the end of days when all the dead forms, the frozen conflicts and everything, come back to life. They're all reintegrated. Well, that deductive logic is reintegrated in the inductive flow of experience, and you get the total dialectic flowing, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and everybody lives happily ever after. Anything like that. Okay, so that's as far as I got with this tape. I don't want to start something new here. So that's pretty good. We got off to a good start. But there's a lot more here in essay number 64. And there's a lot more here in the therapy process that we can relate it to. And so, by the way, just as an advertisement, I'm going to do a similar video connecting this essay and also 22 and 282 to rap music. Rap music is another variation. Another very hot topic these days, just like dealing with violent kids is a hot topic these days. And to see how these ideas here help understand that from, first of all, from a philosophical point of view, to understand what's going on, and second of all, for those who are interested in talking about it in Jewish terminology, this gives you a bunch of labels you can use to talk about it and still be considered Jewish, instead of just, oh, Goyishkeit, Goyishkeit. Okay. Reminds me, I tried to talk to a neighbor of mine the other day, and this, one of my religious neighbors, I try to tell them about some of this stuff. Oh yeah, yeah, Buddhism, Christianity. Oh yeah, dangerous, dangerous. So if you think it's dangerous, push delete, right? Put your filter on, go hide. But reality does not hide. You might hide from reality, but as they say, if you don't deal with the reality of the situation, sooner or later, the reality of the situation will deal with you. Okay.